The stars looked cold and distant through the viewing port of Terrace. Pride as Captain Jake Morrison checked the mining reports for the third time that morning. His weathered hands moved across the datapad with practiced ease while his dark eyes scanned the asteroid field that stretched endlessly before them. The Kepler 442 system had been humanity's assigned workspace for 6 months now, and Jake knew every rock and crater in the belt by heart. His wife Lisa walked onto the bridge carrying 2 cups of coffee and that smile that had kept him sane for 20 years of marriage. She wore her medical officer uniform with the same quiet dignity she brought to everything else in her life. Behind her came their son Danny, barely 18 and eager to prove himself on his first real space mission. The boy had his mother's gentle eyes, but Jake's stubborn jaw, and both parents worried he was too soft for the harsh reality of human life in Federation space. Morning started like any other with a crew of 30 humans working the extraction sites while alien overseers watched from their comfortable ships. The Zephyrian Empire had been fighting the Federation for months, but the war felt distant and unreal to the miners who just wanted to finish their quota and go home. Jake had served in the Earth Marines before the Federation found their world, and he recognized the signs of a conflict spreading beyond its original boundaries. Lisa touched his shoulder and pointed to the sensor display where 3 unknown ships had appeared at the edge of the system. Jake felt his old military instincts wake up as he studied the vessel configurations. These were not Federation ships, and they were moving too fast to be merchants or explorers. The lead ship bore the distinctive markings of Zephyrian raiders, and Jake's blood went cold as he realized what was about to happen. The first plasma bolts tore through the Federation escort ships before anyone could react. Jake watched in horror as the smaller vessels simply vanished in bright flashes of superheated gas and metal. The Zephyrian ships moved with deadly purpose toward the defenseless mining fleet while emergency alarms screamed throughout Terrace. Pride. Jake grabbed the ship's communication system and began broadcasting evacuation orders to all human vessels in the area. Danny ran to the weapon controls, but Terra's Pride was a mining ship with only basic defensive systems. Lisa moved to her medical station and began preparing for casualties while Jake tried to coordinate an escape route through the asteroid field. The Zephyrian raiders seemed to take pleasure in hunting down the fleeing miners one by one, their advanced weapon systems making short work of the converted cargo haulers that served as humanity's assigned fleet. The lead raider ship turned its attention to Terra's Pride, and Jake felt the deck plates vibrate under his feet as plasma fire struck their hull. Lisa called out damage reports while Danny tried desperately to return fire with their single laser cannon. Jake knew they had maybe minutes before the ship's life support failed, and he made the hardest decision of his life by ordering all hands to the escape pods. Lisa refused to leave her medical station where 3 injured crew members needed immediate attention. Jake tried to carry her to safety, but she pushed him away and told him to save their son instead. The ship shuddered again as another plasma bolt penetrated the hull, and Jake saw the hull breach warning lights begin flashing throughout the corridor. Danny grabbed his father's arm and tried to pull him toward the escape pods, but Jake would not leave without Lisa. The explosion that tore through the medical bay seemed to happen in slow motion. Jake watched his wife disappear in a cloud of debris and superheated plasma, while emergency systems screamed warnings about hull integrity failure. He reached the medical bay just as the emergency bulkhead sealed and found Lisa trapped under a fallen support beam with burns covering most of her body. She looked up at him with those gentle eyes and whispered that he had to protect Danny and all the other human children who deserved better than slavery. Her hand grew cold in his as the life support systems failed, and Jake held her close while their son screamed in rage and grief from the doorway. The sound of Danny's anguish seemed to echo through the ship's communication system and reach Every human ear in the sector. Jake carried his wife's body to the escape pod while Danny wept and cursed the aliens who had destroyed their family. As Tara's pride broke apart around them, Jake activated the emergency beacon that would broadcast their location to any Federation rescue ships in the area. But something else was happening on the communication channels as human voices across the system began responding to Danny's cry of pain and fury. For 50 years, humanity had served the Federation as miners and laborers and cannon fodder in wars. They did not start or understand. They had accepted their place as the newest and weakest species in galactic civilization and tried to earn respect through hard work and loyalty. But as Jake Morrison held his dead wife and listened to his son's broken heart calling out for justice, something fundamental changed in the human spirit. Escape pod drifted through the debris field that had once been Tara's pride while Jake stared at Lisa's peaceful face and made a promise that would change the galaxy forever. Danny's tears had stopped, but his eyes now burned with something Jake recognized from his own reflection after Earth fell to Federation forces. It was the look of someone who had been pushed too far and would never back down again. The Zephyrian Raiders had made a mistake that would cost them everything. They had shown humanity what happened to species that trusted the Federation for protection, and they had killed the wrong man's wife. Jake Morrison was no longer just a mining captain with a family to protect. He was a former Marine with nothing left to lose, and a son who would never forgive or forget what had been taken from them. News of the Kepler 442 massacre reached Earth within hours, and President Helen Carter felt the weight of 6 billion human lives pressing down on her shoulders as she read the casualty reports. Tara's pride had been destroyed along with 12 other mining ships, and over 400 human workers were dead or missing. The Federation Council had already dismissed the attack as an unfortunate incident in an active war zone and offered no compensation or protection for future operations. Carter walked through the underground tunnels beneath New Washington, where humanity's real government had operated since the Federation occupation began 50 years ago. The aliens thought they controlled Earth through their puppet administrators, but they had never understood how humans truly organized themselves. Every major decision affecting humanity was made in these hidden chambers by leaders the Federation did not even know existed. The reports flooding in from human colonies across the galaxy told the same story everywhere. Workers were abandoning their posts, sabotaging equipment, and demanding answers about why the Federation could not protect them from raiders. On the mining world of New Montana, 3,000 humans had barricaded themselves in the extraction facilities and refused to come out until they received better security guarantees. Similar uprisings were spreading to every human settlement in Federation Space. Commander Rick Sullivan stood on the bridge of the Federation battleship Galactic Unity and listened to his orders with growing disgust. The alien officers wanted him to take his human crew to New Montana and suppress the uprising by whatever means necessary. They spoke about the rebellious humans like they were discussing a mechanical malfunction that needed repair rather than people demanding basic safety protection. Sullivan had served the Federation Navy for 15 years and earned his rank through competence and loyalty that his alien superiors found useful but never respected. He commanded the human contingent aboard Galactic Unity and knew that his crew trusted him to make the right decisions when everything went wrong. As he stared at the tactical display showing New Montana's position, he realized that everything had indeed gone very wrong. Human crew members gathered in the mess hall that night, and Sullivan could see the same anger in their eyes that he felt burning in his own chest. Chief Engineer Betty Clark had lost her brother in the Kepler 442 attack, and weapons Officer Greg Stone had cousins working the New Montana mines. These were not just random humans following orders anymore, but people who had finally been pushed beyond their breaking point. Sullivan made His decision during the night shift when most of the alien officers were sleeping in their quarters. He activated the ship's internal communication system and spoke directly to every human crew member aboard Galactic Unity. His words were simple and clear as he told them that they had been slaves long enough, and today they would choose to be something else entirely. The takeover happened with military precision that shocked the alien officers who had never seen humans work together as a coordinated fighting force. Sullivan's people had been planning this moment for years, and they knew exactly which systems to control and which alien crew members to isolate. Within 30 minutes, they had complete control of one of the Federation's most powerful warships, Dr. Amanda Foster sat in her laboratory aboard Horizon Base and stared at the classified files she had just discovered in the Federation's xenobiology database. The truth about humanity's place in galactic civilization was worse than anyone had imagined, and she knew that millions of human lives depended on getting this information to the resistance networks operating throughout Federation space. The files revealed that humans had not been invited to join the Federation as the official histories claimed. Earth had been conquered and its population indoctrinated through and its population indoctrinated through a program of systematic cultural destruction that lasted 3 generations. Human children were taken from their families as infants and raised in Federation facilities where they learned to serve alien masters without question. Foster's hands shook as she read the detailed reports about how human psychology had been studied and manipulated to create the perfect servant species. The Federation had identified humanity's greatest strength as their ability to work together under extreme pressure and had spent decades finding ways to redirect that cooperation toward alien goals rather than human advancement. The communication array on Horizon Base had access to every human settlement in the sector, and Foster began transmitting the classified files to resistance cells across the galaxy. She knew that discovery would mean death, but she also knew that humans deserved to understand what had been stolen from them and why they had spent 50 years believing themselves to be willing participants in their own oppression. Jake Morrison's escape pod was picked up by a human cargo ship 3 days after. Terra's pride was destroyed, and he found himself aboard the freighter New Hope with 40 other survivors from the mining fleet. Captain Roy Mitchell had been running supplies between human colonies for 20 years, and his ship had become an unofficial communication hub for resistance activities throughout the human colonies for 20 years, and his ship had become an unofficial communication hub for resistance activities throughout the human colonies for 20 years, and his ship had become an unofficial communication hub for resistance activities throughout the PS sector. Mitchell showed Jake the messages that were flooding in from human settlements across Federation space as workers learned the truth about their history and began organizing themselves into fighting units. The cargo holds of New Hope were already being converted into meeting spaces where human leaders could plan their response to generations of alien oppression. Danny Morrison had not spoken since watching his mother die, but Jake could see the rage building behind his son's eyes like a storm waiting to break. The boy spent hours studying star charts and Federation fleet dispositions with an intensity that reminded Jake of his own military training. At 18, Danny was already thinking like a strategist, and Jake realized that his son's generation would never accept the limitations that had defined human existence for the past 50 years. The meeting that took place in New Hope's main cargo bay included representatives from 12 human colonies and mining operations. Jake found himself elected as spokesman not because he sought leadership, but because everyone in the room had heard about Terra's pride and understood that the massacre represented a turning point in human history. Foster's intelligence reports arrived during the meeting, and Jake watched grown men and women weep as they learned how their grandparents had been brainwashed into forgetting their true heritage. The Federation had not just conquered Earth, but had systematically destroyed human culture and replaced it with artificial loyalty to alien masters who saw them as nothing more than useful animals. Sullivan's capture of galactic unity provided the Resistance with their first real military asset, and Jake realized that they finally had the tools necessary to fight back against their oppressors. The Federation had made a critical error by training humans in military tactics and giving them access to advanced weapon systems. They had assumed that human loyalty would prevent rebellion, but they had never understood that loyalty could be redirected toward human interests rather than alien goals. Jake stood before the assembled representatives and spoke about his wife's death and the promise he had made to protect human children from the fate that had befallen their parents. His words were broadcast to resistance cells throughout the galaxy and became the unofficial declaration of independence that marked the beginning of humanity's war for freedom. The ember that had started with one woman's death was spreading across the stars as humans everywhere began to understand that they were not servants or subjects but warriors who had forgotten how to fight. Jake Morrison established his base of operations in the Vale Nebula, where sensor interference made detection nearly impossible and the dense gas clouds provided perfect cover for the growing human fleet. New Hope had been joined by dozens of other ships as human workers abandoned their Federation assignments and joined the rebellion that was spreading across the galaxy. Like wildfire, Danny Morrison stood beside his father on the bridge of their new flagship and studied the tactical displays with an intensity that impressed even veteran military officers. At 18, he had already demonstrated a natural understanding of space combat that reminded Jake of the greatest strategists in human history. The boy's grief had transformed into something harder and more focused as he channeled his pain into plans for destroying the Federation forces that had murdered his mother. The fleet hidden in the nebula included mining ships converted into assault vessels, cargo haulers equipped with military hardware, and passenger transports modified to carry assault teams. Jake marveled at human ingenuity as his people turned their industrial equipment into weapons of war and transformed their civilian vessels into the foundation of an army that the Feyhadidiran did industrial equipment into weapons of war and transformed their civilian vessels into the foundation of an army that the Fey as his people turned their industrial equivalent into weapons of war, and to Sindrin film their civilian vessels into the foundation of an army that the Sangyinas Federation had never imagined possible. Admiral Kate Rodriguez arrived in the nebula with 12 Federation warships and over 8,000 human crew members who had mutinied against their alien officers. Rodriguez had spent 30 years climbing the ranks of the Federation Navy, and her defection sent shockwaves throughout the alien command structure. She brought with her detailed intelligence about every major Federation installation and patrol route in 3 sectors. Rodriguez met with Jake in the converted conference room aboard New Hope and spread star charts across the table while she explained the Federation's military weaknesses. The aliens had grown complacent during 50 years of human servitude and assumed that their former slaves would never pose a serious threat to established galactic order. Their defensive positions were designed to repel external invasion rather than internal rebellion. Danny listened to the strategic discussions with the focused attention of someone twice his age and occasionally offered suggestions that impressed the experienced officers. Jake realized that his son possessed an intuitive understanding of warfare that had somehow survived generations of Federation indoctrination. The boy could see patterns in enemy movements and predict tactical responses with accuracy that bordered on supernatural insight. The first coordinated human strike targeted 12 Federation supply depots simultaneously across a region of space, spanning 6 star systems. Jake commanded the overall operation while Danny led one of the assault teams with precision that shocked their alien opponents. The humans struck with surgical accuracy, destroying military supplies while carefully avoiding civilian casualties. General Marcus Thompson had been a Federation Ground Forces commander before learning the truth about human history and joining the rebellion. He brought with him knowledge of guerrilla warfare tactics that had been suppressed from human education for generations. Thompson's soldiers began appearing on Federation worlds like ghosts, striking military targets and vanishing before reinforcements could respawn. The Federation Council finally recognized the scope of the human uprising when their supply lines began collapsing throughout the inner systems. Admiral Kresh of the Altarian Navy demanded immediate action to crush the rebellion before it spread to other client species who might be inspired by human success. The Council authorized unlimited force against human targets and declared all rebels to be enemies of galactic civilization. President Carter received word of the Federation's declaration through her network of agents embedded throughout the alien government structure. She activated sleeper cells that had been preparing for this moment since the original conquest of Earth and watched as critical systems began failing across Federation space. Human technicians and engineers had built most of the infrastructure that kept the Federation running, and now they were systematically destroying their own work. Jake stood in the command center of his flagship and watched as reports flooded in from human forces throughout the galaxy. Thompson's ground teams had captured 3 major Federation bases while Rodriguez's naval units were engaging alien fleets and running battles across multiple star systems. Danny coordinated the tactical data with an efficiency that amazed everyone who worked with him. Battle of Rigel Station marked the first time that humans had defeated a major Federation fleet in open combat. Rodriguez commanded the human ships with tactics that no alien admiral could predict or counter, while Jake provided strategic oversight from his position in the nebula. The Federation lost 47 warships in the engagement while human casualties remained minimal. Danny Morrison led the boarding parties that captured Rigel Station, and his assault teams fought through the massive installation with a ferocity that terrified the alien defenders. The humans moved through the station's corridors like apex predators hunting prey, and the surviving Federation personnel surrendered rather than face continued combat against an enemy they could not understand. The capture of Rigel Station provided the human rebellion with a permanent base of operations outside the nebula and access to Federation communication networks that revealed the true extent of alien panic about the uprising. Intelligence reports showed that several client species were reconsidering their loyalty to the Federation, while others were demanding protection from human retaliation. Thompson's ground forces introduced the galaxy to concepts of warfare that had been unknown since humanity joined the Federation. His soldiers used terrain and weather to their advantage, employed psychological warfare against alien troops, and coordinated their attacks with a precision that suggested supernatural communication abilities. The Federation military had no defense against enemies who fought with such ruthless creativity. Jake received a message from the Federation Council offering to negotiate a peaceful resolution to the conflict if humans would return to their assigned roles in galactic society. His response was broadcast throughout Federation space and became a rallying cry for oppressed species everywhere. He told the aliens that they had 50 years to treat humans as equals, and now they would learn to fear them as enemies. Rodriguez's intelligence network revealed that the Federation was preparing to deploy their ultimate weapon against human populations. The Planet Killer was a massive space station capable of sterilizing entire worlds, and the aliens planned to use it against New Earth as an example of what happened to species that defied galactic authority. Danny studied the intelligence reports about the Planet Killer and developed an assault plan that combined everything his people had learned about human tactical superiority. He would lead a strike team into the heart of the weapon system while Rodriguez's fleet provided distraction, and Jake coordinated the overall operation from his command. The human rebellion had grown from a handful of mining ships into a military force that threatened the very foundation of Federation power. Jake Morrison looked at his son and saw not just a grieving teenager, but the future leader of free humanity. The boy's transformation from innocent youth to hardened warrior represented everything that humans were capable of achieving when they finally remembered how to fight. The stars that had once seemed cold and distant now burned with the fire of human determination as Jake prepared his people for the battle that would decide whether humanity remained enslaved or took its rightful place among the free peoples of the galaxy. The Zephyrian Empire launched their massive invasion of Federation space, expecting to face the same poorly coordinated alien fleets they had been fighting for decades. Their war machine consisted of over 300 vessels commanded by Admiral Vorth, a veteran of 50 successful campaigns against Federation forces. Vorth's strategy relied on overwhelming firepower and traditional battle formations that had proven effective against every alien species he had previously encountered. Captain Steve Parker commanded the captured Federation dreadnought Retribution and waited in the shadow of a massive asteroid while Zephyrian scouts passed within weapons range of his hidden position. Parker had learned space combat tactics from Jake Morrison and now applied those lessons to the largest warship in the human fleet. His crew of 200 former Federation personnel had been transformed into something the galaxy had never seen before. Zephyrian Advance Fleet entered the Proxima system expecting to find scattered Federation defenders retreating according to standard alien doctrine. Instead, they discovered human ships using the asteroid belt as cover, while mining platforms provided early warning of enemy movements. Parker's tactical display showed Zephyrian vessels moving in predictable formations that made them perfect targets for unconventional attack patterns. Danny Morrison coordinated the human response from his position aboard the command ship, while his father observed the battle from their base in the Veil Nebula. At 19, Danny had become humanity's youngest admiral, and his tactical brilliance was already legendary among human forces throughout the galaxy. He watched the Zephyrian fleet approach and smiled as he activated the trap that would demonstrate human military superiority to both enemies. Parker's ship emerged from the asteroid field like a hunting predator and struck the Zephyrian rear guard. Before their sensors could track his approach, Retribution moved with an agility that should have been impossible for a vessel of its size, while human-modified weapon systems delivered devastating firepower against enemy targets. The Zephyrians lost 12 ships in the first minutes of combat before they understood what was happening. Human ships throughout the system began their coordinated assault as Parker's initial attack drew Zephyrian attention away from the real threat. Mining vessels equipped with military hardware appeared from behind asteroids and debris clouds, while converted cargo haulers launched assault shuttles filled with human marines. The Zephyrians found themselves fighting an enemy that used every piece of available terrain to tactical advantage. Admiral Vorth tried to reorganize his fleet according to standard battle doctrine, but human forces refused to engage in the kind of formal combat that aliens considered civilized warfare. Parker's ships appeared from impossible angles, struck with overwhelming force, and vanished before return fire could be coordinated. The humans fought like their asteroid field was an extension of their own bodies. Danny Morrison's assault on the Zephyrian fortress world of Zerion Prime became the defining moment that established human reputation throughout the galaxy. His fleet of 40 ships faced planetary defenses designed to repel invasion forces 10 times their size, but Danny had studied the fortress world's weaknesses and developed an attack plan that exploited every flaw in alien defensive thinking. Orbital bombardment platforms protecting Zerion Prime were positioned according to traditional military doctrine that assumed Attackers would approach from standard vectors using conventional tactics. Danny's ships instead approached from the planet's polar regions, where gravitational effects created sensor shadows that hid their advance until they were within striking range of the defensive installations. Human Marines stormed the orbital platforms, using boarding techniques that combined zero-gravity combat training with close quarters fighting skills that no alien species had ever developed. The fortress world's defenders watched in horror as human soldiers moved through their installations like they had been born in space, adapting to every environment and overcoming every obstacle with resourcefulness that seemed supernatural. General Thompson's ground assault on Zarian Prime introduced the Zephyrian military to concepts of planetary warfare that they had never imagined possible. His troops used the planet's weather patterns, geological features, and native wildlife as weapons against an enemy that had never learned to think beyond traditional battlefield tactics. Thompson's soldiers appeared everywhere and nowhere, striking from directions that should have been impossible. The capture of Zarian Prime sent shockwaves throughout both the Federation and the Zephyrian Empire, as military analysts tried to understand how humans had achieved the impossible. Dr. Foster's research teams studying captured alien military doctrine discovered that other species had never developed the kind of adaptive thinking that humans considered natural and instinctive. Foster's xenobiology reports revealed why humans were so effective in combat compared to other galactic species. Humanity had evolved through millions of years of warfare on Earth, where survival required constant adaptation to new threats and changing environments. While other species developed cooperation or flight responses, humans became apex predators, capable of using tools, tactics, and teamwork with deadly efficiency. The Federation Council attempted to negotiate with Jake Morrison after Zarian Prime fell to human forces. Their representatives offered humanity equal status within the Federation structure and guaranteed representation in galactic government if humans would cease their military operations against alien targets. The Council's message was broadcast throughout human space, where it was received with bitter laughter. Jake Morrison's response became legendary throughout the galaxy as he addressed not just the Federation Council, but every alien species that had participated in humanity's enslavement. His words were simple and direct as he told them that they had 50 years to treat humans as equals, and now they would learn to fear them as enemies instead. The battle reports from Zarian Prime reached every corner of galactic civilization and sparked panic among species that had never considered humans to be a serious military threat. Intelligence agencies throughout Federation space began reassessing human capabilities, while military planners tried to develop new strategies for fighting an enemy that refused to follow established rules of warfare. Admiral Rodriguez's fleet engaged the main Zephyrian invasion force in the Centauri system and demonstrated human naval superiority in the largest space battle that the galaxy had witnessed in over a century. Her ships moved in coordinated patterns that confused alien tactical computers, while human weapon systems proved devastatingly effective against traditional defensive measures. Zephyrian Empire's defeat marked the end of their expansion into Federation territory and established humans as the dominant military force in their region of space. Admiral Vorth's surviving ships retreated to their home systems, while Zephyrian military analysts struggled to understand how their superior numbers and advanced technology had proven useless against human tactical innovation. Danny Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched Zephyrian vessels fleeing the battlefield, while human ships pursued them with ruthless efficiency. His transformation from grieving teenager to military genius represented everything that humanity was capable of achieving when they finally remembered their true nature as warriors. Rather than servants, the galaxy was learning that humans were not the weak and primitive species that the Federation had described in their official histories, They were instead the most dangerous predators that galactic civilization had ever produced, and their rage was burning across the stars like an unstoppable fire that would consume everything in its path. Human forces controlled half of former Federation space when the alien leadership made their most desperate decision and authorized deployment of the Planet Killer against New Earth. The massive space station had been built in secret over 20 years and represented the Federation's ultimate response to threats against their galactic dominance. Its weapons could sterilize entire worlds and leave them lifeless rocks floating in space. Jake Morrison received intelligence about the Planet Killer from President Carter's network of agents embedded throughout the Federation government. The weapons station was approaching New Earth with an escort of 60 warships and would arrive within 48 hours. 50 million humans lived on New Earth and evacuation was impossible given the time constraints and available transportation resources. Danny Morrison studied the tactical data about the Planet Killer and realized that conventional assault tactics would be useless against a target of such massive size and defensive capability. The station's shields could withstand bombardment from entire fleets, while its weapon systems were capable of destroying attackers before they could close to effective range. Only a direct assault on the station's interior offered any hope of success. The strike team that Danny assembled included the best human soldiers from every branch of the rebellion's military forces. Marine Sergeant Carl Young had fought in the capture of Zarian Prime, while Corporal Nancy Price had led boarding actions against dozens of Federation vessels. Lieutenant Kevin Hart specialized in zero-gravity combat, and Ensign Julie Stone was an expert in alien technology systems. Admiral Rodriguez coordinated the largest space battle in galactic history as her fleet engaged the Planet Killer's escort vessels while Danny's strike team infiltrated the weapons station. Rodriguez commanded over 200 human ships against Federation forces that still possessed superior numbers and technology. Her tactical brilliance would determine whether the strike team had any chance of reaching their target. The human fleet attacked the Federation escort using every unconventional tactic that had proven successful in previous engagements. Rodriguez's ships appeared from multiple directions simultaneously, while converted mining vessels launched clouds of debris that confused enemy sensors. Human captains used asteroids, gas clouds, and even destroyed ships as cover while they maneuvered. For optimal firing positions, Danny's assault shuttle approached the Planet Killer during the height of the space battle, when enemy attention was focused on Rodriguez's attacking fleet. The weapons station was larger than most cities and bristled with defensive systems designed to prevent exactly the kind of infiltration mission that Danny was attempting. His team would have to fight through corridors built for creatures twice their size. The interior of the Planet Killer resembled a mechanical labyrinth filled with automated defenses and alien security forces that had never faced human opponents in close quarters combat. Danny's team moved through the massive structure using tactics developed during the capture of Federation installations while adapting to an environment that challenged every assumption about space station design. Sergeant Young led the assault team through maintenance shafts and service tunnels that were too small for most alien species but perfectly suited to human size and agility. The team's progress toward the station's core was marked by a trail of disabled security systems and neutralized defensive positions as they demonstrated the combat skills that had made humanity feared throughout the galaxy. The Planet Killer's command center was protected by layers of security that should have been impenetrable to any infiltration force, but Danny's team had studied alien psychology and understood how their enemies thought about defensive planning. Human soldiers appeared in locations that alien designers had considered impossible to reach while using weapons and tactics that no Federation security manual had ever anticipated. Captain Steve Parker's dreadnought Retribution led a desperate Assault against the planet killer's main weapon array while Danny's team fought toward the station's power core. Parker's ship absorbed devastating damage as it closed with a massive weapon station, but his crew kept fighting with the determination that had become humanity's signature. Characteristic in every engagement, Rodriguez's fleet suffered heavy casualties. As Federation reinforcements arrived to protect their ultimate weapon but human ships, continued fighting with a ferocity that amazed alien observers. Every human captain understood that failure meant the death of 50 million people on New Earth, and they were willing to sacrifice their ships and crews to prevent that catastrophe. Danny Morrison reached the planet killer's central power core. With half his assault team dead or wounded and Federation security forces converging on his position from every direction. The massive reactor that powered the weapon station was protected by force fields and automated defenses that had never been tested against human ingenuity and determination. Lieutenant Hart and Ensign Stone worked to disable the station's power systems while Danny and the surviving team members held off waves of alien security forces in running battles through the reactor chamber. The humans fought with desperate courage as they realized that millions of lives depended on their success in the next few minutes. The explosion that destroyed the planet killer lit up space like a new star and was visible from worlds throughout the sector. Jake Morrison watched from his command ship as the massive weapon station disappeared in a ball of superheated plasma while Rodriguez's surviving fleet regrouped around the wreckage. The Federation's ultimate weapon had been destroyed by a handful of human soldiers fighting for their people's survival. Danny Morrison's survival became legendary throughout human space as reports spread about how he had led his team through the heart of the enemy's most powerful weapon and emerged victorious against impossible odds. His tactical brilliance and personal courage inspired human forces throughout the galaxy and established him as the natural successor to his father's leadership. Destruction of the planet killer marked the end of Federation military superiority and the beginning of their complete collapse as a galactic power. Species throughout their former territory began declaring independence, while others actively joined human forces in hunting down the alien fleets that had once seemed invincible. Admiral Rodriguez's victory in the Battle of New Earth established human naval doctrine as the new standard for space combat throughout the galaxy. Alien military academies began studying human tactics while their governments desperately sought peace negotiations with Jake Morrison, and the human leadership President Carter emerged from the underground tunnels beneath New Washington and addressed the free peoples of Earth for the first time in 50 years. Her words were broadcast throughout human space and reached every species that had witnessed humanity's transformation from slaves to liberators. The Federation Council's final message to Jake Morrison was a complete surrender that acknowledged human independence and withdrew all alien claims to former human territory. The message was broadcast throughout the galaxy and marked the official end of the war that had begun with one woman's death in the Kepler 442 system. 2 years earlier, Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched Federation vessels fleeing human space while his son coordinated pursuit operations with the same tactical brilliance that had destroyed the planet killer. The transformation from mining captain to leader of free humanity was complete, and the galaxy would never be the same. 2 years after the Kepler 442 massacre, Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of his flagship and watched the last Federation vessels disappear into hyperspace as they fled human territory forever. His hair had turned white during the war, and deep lines marked his weathered face, but his eyes still burned with a determination that had carried humanity from slavery to freedom. The transformation from mining captain to first admiral of free humanity was complete. Danny Morrison commanded humanity's newest fleet from the bridge of his own flagship while coordinating patrol operations throughout former Federation space. At 21, he had become the youngest admiral in galactic history, and his tactical genius was studied by military academies on worlds throughout the Spiral Arm. The boy who had wept over his mother's grave now led fleets that made alien empires. Tremble with fear, President Carter addressed the United Human colonies from Earth's restored capital in New Washington as billions of humans throughout the galaxy listened to her words. The underground tunnels that had hidden humanity's real government for 50 years were now museums, while the surface cities celebrated their freedom with festivals that lasted for weeks. Earth's children had come home at last, the Federation's collapse had created a power vacuum that dozens of smaller alien governments were struggling to fill, but none possessed the military capability or political unity necessary to establish galactic dominance. Many species that had been Federation clients now sought human protection from the chaos that followed their former master's defeat. Admiral Rodriguez established the Human Colonial Defense Force as a military organization dedicated to protecting free peoples throughout the galaxy rather than conquering new territory for human expansion. Her fleets patrolled trade routes and defended refugee populations, while maintaining the tactical superiority that had made human forces legendary among both allies and enemies. General Thompson's ground forces became peacekeepers on worlds where Federation withdrawal had left populations vulnerable to raiders and warlords. His soldiers introduced concepts of justice and protection that many alien species had never experienced under Federation rule. Thompson's troops were welcomed as liberators rather than conquerors. Dr. Foster's research teams worked to restore human cultural heritage that had been systematically destroyed during 50 years of Federation indoctrination. Ancient Earth traditions, languages, and customs were recovered from hidden archives and reintroduced to human populations throughout the colonies. The process of cultural renewal became as important as military victory. The memorial service for Lisa Morrison took place on the anniversary of her death in the Kepler 442 system, where Terra's pride had been destroyed. Jake and Danny Morrison stood together beside the monument that marked the spot where humanity's rage had first ignited and spread across the stars like an unstoppable wildfire. Jake's voice was steady as he spoke about his wife's sacrifice and the promise he had made to protect human children from the fate that had befallen their parents. His words were broadcast throughout human space and reached millions of people who owed their freedom to the courage of one woman who had refused to abandon her patients even when death was certain. The inscription on Lisa Morrison's memorial read that here lay the spark that lit humanity's fire, and her death had awakened their rage, which set the galaxy free. Visitors from hundreds of worlds came to pay their respects to the woman whose murder had triggered the greatest military campaign in galactic history. Danny Morrison had grown into a leader who combined his father's determination with tactical brilliance that surpassed every military genius in human history. His transformation from grieving teenager to admiral represented everything that humanity was capable of achieving when they remembered their true nature as warriors and survivors. Zephyrian Empire formally requested peace negotiations after their defeat at Zarian Prime and offered to pay reparations for the massacre that had started the war. Jake Morrison's response was broadcast throughout their territory as he told them that justice had already been served through their military defeat and humiliation on the battlefield. Captain Parker's promotion to Admiral of the Heavy Fleet reflected humanity's new policy of rewarding competence and courage rather than political connections or species loyalty. His tactical innovations during the Planet Killer battle were incorporated into human naval doctrine and studied by officers throughout the Colonial Defense Force. The transformation of human society from Federation clients to galactic liberators created new opportunities for species that had never imagined freedom from alien oppression. Trade agreements, defense pacts, and cultural exchanges replaced the tributary relationships that had defined galactic civilization for centuries. Morrison's final address to the human colonies took place on the 5th anniversary of the wars, and as he announced his retirement from military service and transition to civilian leadership. His words reflected the exhaustion of a man who had carried the weight of humanity's survival for years, but also the satisfaction of someone who had fulfilled every promise he had made. Danny Morrison's acceptance of supreme military command represented the passing of leadership to a new generation that had never known slavery or accepted limitations on human potential. His first orders established exploration fleets dedicated to finding new worlds for human settlement and contact with alien species beyond the former Federation boundaries. The human colonies that spread throughout former Federation territory were not established through conquest but through invitation from local populations who preferred human protection to the chaos that followed Federation collapse. These settlements became centers of learning and innovation that attracted refugees from throughout the galaxy. President Carter's final speech before retiring from office reminded humanity that their victory had not been achieved through superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but through courage, determination, and refusal to accept defeat. Her words became the foundation of human military doctrine and political philosophy. The stars that had once seemed cold and distant now burned with the warmth of human achievement as Jake Morrison watched his son coordinate fleet movements from the command center of humanity's newest space station. The boy's tactical displays showed human ships patrolling territories that spanned dozens of star systems. Jake's reflection on the journey from Kepler 442 to galactic freedom reminded him that humanity's greatest victory had not been military conquest, but the recovery of their true identity as a species that refused to surrender hope even in the darkest circumstances. The rage that had burned across the stars was transforming into something greater. Final scene showed Jake Morrison standing beside his wife's grave, while human ships patrolled the space where their nightmare had begun and their triumph had been forged in blood and sacrifice. The memorial asteroid bore witness to the truth that sometimes a single death could change the course of galactic civilization forever.